The medicine of East Asia is based on a science that does not hold itself separate from the phenomena that it seeks to understand. Our medicine did not grow out of petri dish experimentation or double-blind studies. It arose from observing nature and our part in it. East Asian medicine evolves not from the examination of dead structures, but rather from living systems with their complex, mutually entangled interactions. Welcome to Qiological. I'm Michael Max, the host of this podcast that goes in depth on issues pertinent to practitioners and students of East Asian medicine. Dialogue and discussion have always been elemental to Chinese and other East Asian medicines. Listen into these conversations with experienced practitioners that go deep into how this ancient medicine is alive and unfolding in the modern clinic. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Qiological. Today, we're visiting with Francis Turner. Francis spent 17 years touring and recording with a leading UK Baroque orchestra and ensemble, and during that time began to get interested in Chinese medicine, which she has now been practicing and teaching for over 20 years. She now runs a clinic in Chelsea, England, and has gone deep into the current of Jing Fang, the classic formulas, with Dr. Feng Shi-Lun, who was one of the main students of the Shang Han Lun master of the last century, Dr. Xi-Shu. Both Doctors Feng and Hu have a unique perspective on the 6 levels, which will be a part of our discussion today, as we take a deep dive into the classic formulas and how they're used in modern practice, and looking at some perspectives about the classic formulas and about the Shang Han Lun that you might not have been exposed to yet. These conversations come to you through the generous support of our sponsors and members. All the sponsors here provide helpful products or services that you'll find beneficial in your clinical work. Want to get better at treating concussions and other neurological conditions? Clayton Shu has some innovative methods. Blue Poppy, your new one-stop shop, has speedy shipping options on everything that you need for your clinic. Later in the show, Jane offers you helpful suggestions on how to raise your rates, and Golden Flower Chinese Herbs shares a journey of healing that I think you'll recognize. Do be sure to visit the sponsors page on the Qiological website to take advantage of all the special offers our terrific sponsors have for listeners of the podcast. Picture this. Your clinic is buzzing with patients, and then you realize that you're down to your last box of needles. No need for panic, because Blue Poppy, your one-stop shop for all your acupuncture needs, they ship orders received before 3 p.m. on the same day. With a quick visit to Blue Poppy's website, you can order premium needles, herbal formulas, and that special Dr. Bob's oil that your patients love. Blue Poppy understands practitioners can't keep patients waiting. That's why they strive to get you what you need when you need it. From high-quality Chinese herbs and formulations to acupuncture supplies and clinical essentials, Blue Poppy has served practitioners for nearly 40 years with products that meet the highest of standards. Discover everything Blue Poppy has to offer by visiting www.bluepoppy.com, and don't forget to subscribe to their mailing list for exclusive offers and more. Ever found yourself listening to a Qiological conversation and thinking, wow, I needed to hear that? Yeah, me too. And I never know when I'm going to hear a guest say something that stops my world and reboots it with a larger perspective. If these conversations have ever helped you to feel more grounded, more inspired, or just less alone in this strange and wonderful work we do, consider becoming a member or supporting the podcast with a bit of tithing to the donation jar. It helps keep the lights on here at the Qiological Sound and Motion Lab so that we can bring you these conversations every Tuesday morning. You'll find all the details at qiological.com. Thanks for listening and for being a part of this.
Hey there, I'm Cameron Jafari, an acupuncturist from Los Angeles. So I started learning nanopuncture from Dr. Clayton Shu because I was facing these complex neurological conditions like stroke and MS in my clinic, and I just felt like I lacked a solid process to treat them. Brain-related issues always felt like a whole different animal, and I was looking for a clinical system that worked and could guide me through them. So after attending my first nanopuncture seminar, I was able to apply the process pretty quickly and with pretty amazing results. I remember the first stroke patient I saw afterwards was a guy who had had a stroke 2 years back and he couldn't talk at all. And after a few treatments, he started saying a few words. And a few treatments after that, he could actually have conversations. It was pretty incredible. So this is why I feel like nanopuncture is the future of acupuncture neurology. And you can be a part of that. Their next seminar is on treating concussions and is being co-taught by both Dr. Xu and Dr. Ayla Wolf in New York City on April 26th and 27th. To learn more, visit nanopunctureseminars.com.
Frances, welcome to Qiological.
Well, thank you very much, Michael.
Delightful to have you here.
Great to be here.
So I suspect, as for most of us, you entered the world of Chinese herbal medicine via the methods and the paradigm of modern TCM.
Absolutely. And, I spent many, many years practicing and also teaching TCM and also trying to work out ways of teaching students in a way that would make it possible for them to learn it easily. And I spent many, many years trying to do that with varying success.
Mm-hmm. So what is it that gave you the nudge toward working with this particular perspective, as embodied by Feng Shi-Lun, and his mentor, Xi-Shu? What gave you sort of the heads up on this and what moved you in that direction?
Partly it was luck, I'd say, because there was just an information sent round about Suzanne Robidoux' webinars with Dr. Feng Shi-Lun. And I had a look at this, and strangely, I just decided that I was never, ever going to do any more CPD.
Oh, the universe is so generous with us, isn't it?
You should never decide that kind of thing. So I looked at this thing, and I got a kind of tingling feeling, which is the feeling I get when I think that I've absolutely got to do something. And so I pursued it. And even though the webinars were for US time and I'm in the UK, which meant that they were all in the middle of the night, I actually attended them all. And from the first one, it was absolutely clear to me that this was the thing that I'd been looking for. Dr. Feng presented the 6 syndromes and cases from all the 6 syndromes. And every time he presented something, it was like, oh my goodness, that explains that. And okay, right, that's obvious. And, just like a whole load of pins dropping into place.
Can you give us an example of one of those pins dropping into place, an example of him explaining something from you call it the 6 syndromes. We often call it the 6 levels here, or the 6 confirmations. I think we all know what we're talking about. Can you give us an example of one where you go, oh, well, that explains that?
Well, one of the things is the Shaoyin. And I'd never understood the difference between the Shaoyin and the Zhuan and what particularly made which. And suddenly there was this explanation of the Shaoyin as an exterior syndrome. And to me, this was completely amazing. And the idea that you can treat an exterior syndrome with a concurrent interior deficiency, I suppose that was one of the main things, that suddenly it made sense of that whole syndrome.
I remember reading in the various herb books when I was a student about these conditions where there might be an exterior excess with a concurrent internal deficiency. It kind of made sense in how do I want to say this? I could wrap my mind around it, but actually seeing it in clinic seemed to be a different thing. And here's the other thing for me. I remember learning the 6 levels. You've got your yang levels, you got your yin levels. And to take the idea of a yin level thing, Shaoyin in this case, and thinking of that as having an exterior component, that's just mind-blowing.
Yeah, completely different. Absolutely different. And then this whole thing that I've been thinking about a lot recently is that the Tai Yin is absolutely the core of everything. So apart from possibly the Taiyang Shang Han, which is the cold damage, where you use Ma Huang formulas mainly, everything else has an element of Tai Yin deficiency, even if it's not specifically named. So one of the core things that we're doing is we're deciding what kind of a Tai Yin deficiency is there. So is it a Tai-Yin deficiency of body fluids or blood, or is it more of a Tai-Yin deficiency causing an excess of internal room or blood stasis? So that is underlying everything. It's underlying the Yin. It's even underlying the Tai-Yang Zhongfeng or wind strike.
When you say Tai-Yin, what are you referring to?
The teaching from Dr. Fang here is that the syndromes are locations in the body. There are 3 locations, and each location has a yang and a yin syndrome. So the exterior of the body, the Tai-Yang is the yang aspect of, and the Yin is the yin aspect of. Whereas the interior, the Yang Ming is the yang aspect, and the Tai-Yin is the yin aspect. And then there's this other incredible concept, which is the half interior, half exterior, and that's the Xiaoyang and the Zhuan. So actually, essentially, it's a fairly simple concept of the body. But what you have to remember with the exterior, for example, is that the exterior includes everything pretty much that's not the internal organs. So it includes the bones and the muscles and the ligaments and the skin pores and all of that. Once you start to broaden it in that way, then it's easy to see how things like rheumatoid arthritis can be part of an exterior syndrome, which means that then we can diagnose it as a Tai-Yang or a Xiaoyin.
Okay, so I understand that you spent some time with this. I suspect the people that are listening to our conversation are perhaps having a moment like I'm having right now, which is, how do I wrap my mind around this? Because we had, at least in the schooling that I had, and I suspect it's very similar to the schooling that many of those of you that are listening right now have had. It's like there's exterior or there's interior. And basically, if it has the name Yang in it, it's exterior. And if it has the name Yin in it, it's interior. But I'm hearing you say something really different here, because you're calling Yang Ming an interior level. Now, do I have that right?
Yeah, this is the understanding of the 6 syndromes is absolutely different from Yang being exterior and Yin being interior. Just to reiterate, you have 3 locations, and each location has a Yang and a Yin syndrome.
Right. And when you say 3 locations, what are we referring to here?
So we're referring to the exterior and to the interior.
Oh, in the half and half.
Half exterior.
Right.
So that the exterior is a location in the body. So when you get an invasion, it's not exterior because something's coming from the outside. It's exterior because the disease is manifesting in the areas of the body which are considered to be exterior.
Ah.
That's the skin, the muscles, the bones, the joints. Sometimes the lungs and the nose can be part, or the head can be part of the exterior.
Got it. I can see why this can make it so confusing for many of us, that when we think of something exterior, we're thinking of something coming from the exterior, as opposed to something manifesting in the exterior of the body itself. And that's really where the focus is with this. Am I correct in that?
Absolutely. That's completely right.
Okay. It's kind of like looking at one of those funny pictures. Well, they're not pictures. I forget what they're called, but it used to be a popular thing in the Sunday newspaper here in the United States, maybe 20 years ago. You look at this image. Actually, it was not an image. It looked like a television screen full of static, if you're old enough to remember what that looked like.
Yeah, I am, sadly.
But if you hold your eyes just right, you'll actually see that there's an image, there's a picture on the inside, and it's actually in 3 dimensions. Did you ever see those things?
Absolutely. Yeah, you have to defocus in a particular way, and there it is. Yeah.
And there it is. And not only there it is, it has a certain dimensionality, and you can actually walk around and look around inside of it once your focus is that way.
Yeah, quite right.
I'm going to have to put a link on the show notes page to some of those things, because some of our listeners may not know what we're talking about, but once they see it and get it, I think they'll understand what we're talking about here.
Perhaps you could find a Chinese dragon.
I'll see what I can do about that. Some years ago, I stumbled across one of Dr. Hu Xi-Shu's books when I was in China. For some reason at that point, I don't know, this was 10 or 12 years ago, the Jing Fang was becoming very popular again in China, and the bookstores were full of all kinds of things that maybe hadn't been printed for a long time. And I remember picking up this book of Hu Xi-Shu's and beginning to read it and coming up to this very thing that we're talking about, although after speaking with you, I feel like I understand it better now. The thing that really got my attention about this is the way not only that we look at the 6 conformations or the 6 syndromes, as you say, but that there's ways that they connect that we use in clinic, but we don't really think about. So let me give you an example. The Xiaoyang in the Zhuan, at least as I was taught, Xiaoyang goes into Taiyin when we're thinking about how things get transmitted. And then you got the Zhuan, which is down at the bottom somewhere, and it turns into yang, but nobody could ever explain to me how it turned into yang. You know, it was just like, it's the end of yin, it's the beginning of yang. It's collapse, exhaustion, maybe death. Yang comes out of that. And it never made sense to me until I looked in this book and saw that, well, and this is, as you pointed out, the half interior, half exterior, the Zhuan and the Xiaoyang are the yin and yang aspects of each other.
Exactly. So there's a number of things in there. One of the things that occurs to me is that I remember Dr. Feng Shi-Lun saying, death comes from the Taiyin, not from the Zhuan, which is, I think, interesting. And he considers that all the death clauses are to do with the Taiyin. Even if it says in the beginning of the phrase, in a Xiaoyan syndrome, if there is diarrhea, then you treat with Sinitang or whatever. He says that in that case, that means that there's been a transmission from the Xiaoyan to the Taiyin, because a diarrhea is a Taiyin symptom that is an interior cold symptom. And that is the core of the Shang Han Lun, is to protect us from cold, which is what kills us. That was one thing that came out of what you said for me just then.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing that came out of it was that it's very clear to me from having watched Dr. Feng in clinic that there's no set line of transmission from one syndrome to another. So that a disease can start in the Taiyang and then it can transmit, for example, from oversweating or purging someone inappropriately, it can transmit to the Yangming, or it can transmit to the Taiyin, or it can transmit to the Xiaoyan. There's no guarantee that it's going to transmit into any particular way. That is actually very free, because it means that you can absolutely follow the symptoms to where they're going. And it's very real in clinic, that.
So it's not like a train schedule where this train arrives and then it goes here and then it goes here and then it goes there. It's more like cold comes in, it could transmit anywhere, and it's our job to figure out where is it now and where might it be going.
Absolutely. And even if you have an idea of what might happen, really the job is, where is it now? The whole thing is in the present. It's like it doesn't really matter what happened last week. Like, patients always want to come and tell you what happened last week, but the herbs that you give them are dependent on what is happening today. And that's why we don't give people herbs for long periods of time, because these formulas are really strong and they really do what they say they do. So, after you've had the formula for a week or maybe 2 weeks, you want to know exactly what's happened. And some formulas, maybe even 2 days or 3 days. So you get to know which formulas act in which particular ways in terms of the length of time that you can leave people on them. But basically, you assume that things are going to change. You don't assume you're going to put somebody on a formula that suits them and they'll be on it for the rest of their life.
No, that's antithetical to Chinese medicine thinking in the first place.
It is, but it's, there are a lot of patients, they like a formula and they say, can I have that one again? It's like, no, you can't. You haven't got the symptoms anymore.
I think this is just the way us human beings are. Something comes along and it helps us and we go, I love it. I want it forever. Likewise, something comes along and we have a bad experience. We go, I hate it forever. And yet, in that moment, we love it, or in that moment, we hate it. But really, how do we connect with this moment? And especially as practitioners, how do we connect and see where is it now? Because I don't know about you, but I know myself, I can get kind of lazy sometimes. And I'm thinking, well, this has worked before. I think I'm seeing basically the same thing I saw before. But, sometimes it's just because, well, it's been working, so let's not mess with it until maybe it's not working. How do you sort of focus your clinical eye, so to speak, so that you can see what's happening right now?
It's a question of tracking symptoms. So from the Jing Fang point of view, what you're looking for is a symptom picture. And that includes the tongue and pulse. And if you have, let's say, dry throat, blurry vision, and thirst and ribside pain, for example, you're in the Xiaoyang or possibly the Yin, because those are the core symptoms of heat above. So, but you're looking for all of them. If you just have the dry mouth, you're probably not, or you may not be. So what you're doing is you're looking at all the symptoms they tell you, and then there are specific symptoms that you're checking out all the time, and making a diagnosis on that basis.
This episode is brought to you by Jing, the clinic management software that I use to keep my practice running smoothly. So let's talk about something that can be a little bit uncomfortable: raising your fees. I know, this is something that might feel awkward, but it doesn't have to. With a bit of planning and care, you can handle it in a way that feels right for you and your patients. One tip: give yourself at least 2 months to prepare. This gives you time to get comfortable with the change and let your patients know what's happening. You can share the news through emails, booking reminders, or even just a friendly little sign in your clinic, and avoid over-apologizing. Instead, keep it straightforward and matter-of-fact. Keeping things consistent across the ways that you communicate can really help avoid confusion. Fee increases aren't always easy, but you're not on your own here. For more tips and ideas on how to communicate these changes with confidence, check out frontdesk.chain.app and look for the article, How to Tell Your Clients You're Raising Your Fees. Oh, and one last thing, if you're ready to give Jane a try, use the code CHIOLOGICAL for a 1-month grace period on your new Jane account. What are some of the key things? You say there's certain symptoms that you're checking for all the time. Are there some key things that you're looking for that help you to orient to what's going on with people?
So you're trying to work out hot and cold a lot of time. So dry mouth, thirst, that's a good one. And urination, bowels, normal things really. Sweating, heat at night symptoms in general, bloating, digestive difficulties, and then coughs and colds, or just coughs and wheezing and sinus problems. You want the whole lot. It's a whole picture thing. There are certain lines in the Shang Han Lun, as I'm sure you know, that give you the key symptoms for each pattern.
Oh, the Shang Han Lun's full of that kind of thing.
It's full of it. And really, the more I do this, the more I realize that the way to get better at this medicine is to learn the Shang Han Lun and to really know, okay, like line 263 is my main heat above symptoms. And, lines 1 to 3 are my main Taiyang symptoms. And clause 20 is my main Xiaoyan clause. It sounds a bit kind of geeky, but it really is important to do it.
I had a patient recently with some bad acid reflux, which she didn't usually have, but she had it. Actually, I've been reading Feng Shi-Lun's book with our friend Paula Campanelli.
Oh.
We're slowly chewing through it. And basically line by line, right? So we're learning some different lines and the things that go with it. And I had just done Guizhi Tang Jia Guizhi, which is basically Guizhi Tang with more Guizhi, right?
Yeah.
And this is for Bantu. This is for running piglet. This is for things going up, including, acid reflux. And there's a thing in there in Dr. Feng's book about how this can also be brought about by improper Qigong practices.
Uh-huh.
And I'm thinking, well, that's interesting. I mean, how often are you going to see someone who's improperly practicing Qigong and they've got this kind of, running piglet thing and the various symptoms that go with things going upwards? Later that week, I get a patient who really didn't suffer from acid reflux, but now she had it and it was really bad. And then she was telling me about this new meditative practice that she does, where she sits and she brings the energy from the lower part of her body and she brings it upwards.
Huh.
That's right. And I'm like,
That's funny. So you thought, close 117.
yeah. So, and I'm nervous as a cat in a room full of rocking chairs because generally speaking, I look at her and I go, oh, this is a woman who's much more of like a Ban Sha type constitution. This is some of the stuff I picked up from Dr. Huang, right? And I'm thinking, give her Guizhi. Oh my God. I mean, her tongue's already kind of red. This could go really badly, right? It's going to go either really badly or it's going to help her. So I give her just a few days worth, right? And send her home. And, I'll be darned, but it helped. And I gave her some more and she's in way better shape now. And I also suggested that she try a slightly different meditation practice. But I mean, there it was. I mean, it was in those lines. And how was I able to use that in the clinic? Because I happen to have those lines in my head because I'd read it that week. So we really do have to kind of cultivate that and have it in us to be able to see it out in the world.
Absolutely. And the more I read it, the more I realize it's describing conditions that I see every day. It's just about translating the language used into something which sounds familiar to me. And realizing it. I've been working on the tetany chapter of the Jin Gui. That's chapter 2. And, what is this tetany thing? And it's actually to do with both rigidity and convulsion, so both ends of that. And this idea that there are two different types, really, the soft and the hard, and how you would deal with it. And it's so interesting that immediately one of my patients walks in today and she says, and now I've just started shaking. She's somebody who has MS. And it became really obvious that I needed to use one of the formulas that I'd been working on from the tetany chapter of the Jin Gui. And it's extraordinary the way that happens, that as soon as you work on something, the patient arrives.
Yeah, when we start to look at it, we can begin to see it. Can you tell us a little more about that patient and how you're treating her with this particular perspective?
This is a patient who has MS, or she has just been given a diagnosis, although for a long time she had a doctor who wouldn't give her a diagnosis because it seemed like there was just some brain inflammation that would happen and then go away again and then happen again. I'm basically treating her with a Chaihu prescription. So it's Chaihu Guizhi Ganjiang Tang, but I've got the Guizhi way up at 30. That's because of the degree of upsurging qi that she has, which is massive. This is just a huge prescription. What else have I got in there? Let's see. I've got Huan Qi in there as an addition of 40 grams. And then the Chaihu Huan Qi and Tianhua Fen are at the normal dosages, but the Ganjiang is also way up. It's doubled at 12. And I'm treating her for these extraordinary sensations in her bones. So she gets like really cold sensations and burning sensations, and then that's combined with dizziness. And if she takes the formula, all of the upsurging qi goes, it just goes. And if she doesn't, it comes back again. And then I have to say, you have to look at your patients in the context of their lives as well, and not just see Jing Fang as something that's going to solve everything, because she's somebody who is trying to do something that is impossible. And until she stops trying to do that, it's going to be difficult for her to get better.
What do you mean she's trying to do something impossible?
she's running an artistic company that cannot run in the way that it's running. And I can't really say anymore because
I understand
confidentiality issues.
Of course.
But it's something which is really wonderful what she's doing, but the funding is not really there. And it's a complicated issue. It's one of those things that I think that our lives and our health are completely entwined somehow. And you can take herbs and it will make you feel better, but unless you actually address the cause of what's happening, you're not going to get completely better.
Oh, boy.
Don't you think?
I see this all the time. I see it all the time. That sometimes people come in and they've got this thing and they go, this is the thing that's wrong with me. And yet, sometimes the thing that, I'm using air quotes here, the thing that's wrong with them, in some ways is the thing that's right about them.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Strength and weakness in the same place.
Yeah. It's like some people have a real superpower because they're very sensitive. It makes them a great artist or a great writer or a wonderful whatever. But that sensitivity also, they think they're broken because of their sensitivity, and yet it's the source of so much of their generativity.
That's absolutely true. And then I think, this particular patient, I've been working with her now for about 2 years. And partly I think that the herbs have made her able to continue doing what she's doing. And then I think, oh, well, that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because should she have been able to? But then who am I to say?
I have had the same thought run through my mind. Am I helping them or hurting them by helping them to get through this thing that's hurting them?
Yes.
But yeah, again, who am I to say?
Exactly. So if someone comes to me for herbs and my herbs make them feel better, that's all I can do is give them herbs. And I will always do my absolute best to make themselves feel as better as they can. But, this is another thing with the Jing Fang. How, for me, Jing Fang is different from other ways of looking at herbs is that somehow it supports the body's own ability to make itself well. And I think that's because, going back to what I was talking about at the beginning, it's because it really starts in the Tai Yin. If I'm looking at this formula that I've given this particular patient I'm talking about, there are quite a lot of Tai Yin herbs in there, supporting everything, underlying everything. And if we can get somebody's Tai Yin to work well, the digestion to work well, and the body fluids to be nourished and generated, then the person can make themselves well if the conditions are right in their life. And that's the way I work with the rest of my practice. It's the way I work with acupuncture and healing that I also do. So I love that about Jing Fang, that it has this focus.
Well, it reminds me a bit. When I hear you say the Tai Yin, I immediately think of the digestive system as well. The lungs to some degree and what they do, but primarily the digestive system. And it makes me think about Li Dongyuan, and the Earth School.
Yes.
Here's another echo. Here's another doctor in another dynasty, hundreds of years later, looking at something similar.
Yes, indeed. And of course, Li Dongyuan would have been absolutely familiar with the Shang Han Lun and the Jing Gui. Otherwise, he could never have written the formulas that he wrote.
So what is that about? Artists, all artists steal, really great artists steal shamelessly.
And everyone stands on the shoulders of the people that went before them.
Yes, we do.
We do, and that's how it is.
Hey, I want to get back to something.
Li Dongyuan is he's a fantastic doctor, and I love his formulas. The thing that I like about the Shang Han Lun and the Feng Shi-Lun approach is that when I'm trying to teach students how to prescribe Chinese herbal medicine, it gives a delimited number of herbs and formulas, and it gives a really clear system about how to use them. It says, if you've got a Tai Yang, Tai Yin together, you treat from the Tai Yin, except if there's upsurging Qi or excessive pain. That's really clear. If you've got a Tai Yang, Yang Ming together, you treat from the Tai Yang. And then you can deal with the Yang Ming possibly at the same time, or possibly it will just go away of its own accord. Also, very, very clear. And as a teacher, I really like that. And as a practitioner, I really like that.
Well, as a practitioner, it's a lifesaver because so often we see these concurrent situations. And it's like, okay, great. I see these two concurrent situations, but where do I begin? How do I start to untie this knot?
Exactly. And we find that to treat from the Tai Yin in a Tai Yang, Tai Yin is repeated throughout the Shang Han Lun in about, 6 or 7 clauses. So it was a really important thing. And of course, then you realize that that's because you have to stop loss of body fluids. So you've got to generate the body fluids and then you can do anything. And that goes back to the Tai Yin again.
It sounds like you have studied this long enough and deep enough and used it in your clinic and have enough experience that there's a few sort of axioms, I guess you could say. I mean, you just rattled a few off to us about, oh, there's this, there's that. This is where you begin.
Yes, I think that's probably true. I've been doing this now since 2014. So where are we now? We're in 2018. So it's 4 years. And previous to that, I already knew my herbs and formulas, really. I've been teaching them for 10 years or more. So, yeah, I think I do begin to know it. And I use it every week in clinic. And I teach an apprenticeship training in clinic every week. So what that does is it gives us a chance to look at things as a group and to discuss things. And to discuss things clinically. These symptoms could be this, or perhaps they could be that, or we'll try this, and then if this happens, we'll know it wasn't. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely.
You have an idea. You don't always precisely know because you don't always have the exact symptom picture or all the symptoms. And sometimes you have to take a punt on it. You say, okay, no, I think it's this, and you have to nail your flag to the mast and give the formula, and then you get the feedback, and then you know exactly.
And then you know what to do. I had a teacher when I was in school who said to us one day, he said, you'll know you really know an herb or you really know a formula when you have used it and it's worked, and you've used it and it hasn't, and you know why.
Yes, exactly. When somebody has a reaction and you can read that formula and you can say, okay, the reaction is because of this herb. Like I had a patient the other day, she has the beginnings of Parkinson's, and I was using longumuli. Now the longumuli were at 15 each, which is the standard dosage. At a certain point, I raised them. And then she had heavy feelings in her legs. And I read that formula and there was nothing else in it that could have done that. And as soon as I put the longumuli back down to 15, it was fine. So, that kind of thing. You learn that by clinic. That's absolutely the only way of learning.
Yeah, it takes a bit of courage to do this work.
It does, yes.
Courage and attentiveness to what we're doing. We're going to be wrong a lot of the time.
Jing is reasonably robust, I think. It's like you can be more or less right and you'll get a fairly good result. If you're absolutely right, you get an amazing result. That's when you get like the key is in the lock and it turns and it gets that satisfying click. And that's great. But quite a lot of the time you get it more or less right. And then the patient is enough better that the thing has stopped bothering them. That is also all right, I think. And if you get it completely wrong, then the patient really will feel terrible. But you know why.
Imagine this. A patient walks into your clinic. They're carrying more than the pain in their body. There's a story there. A history woven with the stress of long days, the ache of things unsaid, and the quiet longing for something to shift. You listen, not just with your ears, but with your hands, your intuition, your heart. It's not just about needles or a formula. It's about connection, understanding the threads that tie us together, mind, body, and spirit. That is where golden flower Chinese herbs comes in. Rooted in tradition and crafted with care, their formulas are more than herbs. They're a bridge between ancient wisdom and modern practice. Every bottle, a quiet partner in your work, helping you to meet your patients where they are. Because healing isn't just about treating symptoms. It's about creating trust, cultivating belonging, and helping someone feel truly seen. Golden Flower Chinese Herbs, your partner in practice and connection, where tradition meets care. And then you can do something about it. And then hopefully you've learned something about the formula that you gave them.
And that's what obviously happened at the time of Jing, because he is always saying, you know, if this, and this happens because the doctor has inappropriately sweated or purged or inappropriately done something or else other, then you do this. Then you use this formula. So that, like every other line, is about how to deal with the doctor doing something wrong.
You know, maybe the Shang Han Lun should be renamed. You know, there is the classic of difficulties. Maybe we should call the Shang Han Lun the classic of mistakes.
Yeah, yes, quite. It is quite funny, really.
Hi, it's Toby here again. I use the Chinese Nutritional Strategies app to answer the question, what foods can I recommend for my patients with insomnia? The answer, drawn from the Chinese medical classic texts, are beef liver, beets, chicken eggs, hops, lily bulbs, longans, lotus seed, mulberries, oysters, Russian olives, spinach, wheat, and yogurt. The Chinese Nutritional Strategies app has hundreds of clinical indications like insomnia in its database of more than 300 common foods. This is along with their temperature, flavor, actions, notes, seasonal recommendations, and differential diagnosis categories. This database is searchable by any of these criteria, and sorting through it allows the practitioner to compile a list of recommended foods and then share those recommendations via email or as a hard copy with the patient. More information is available at thechinesenutritionapp.com.
I want to come back just for a moment to Guizhi. You mentioned a little while ago that there was a formula that you used for this person with MS. And you really bumped up the Guizhi in it.
I did.
So Guizhi is an interesting thing. It's a food-grade herb. It's used a lot in cooking, in baking. Everybody's familiar with cinnamon. And it's so common. I think it might be easy to write off what a powerful medicinal it actually is. I'd like to get your hit, your riff on Guizhi and what it does really well, and also some cautions that people might want to use around its use. Again, it's a very common substance, but there's contraindications. So could you give us a little riff on cinnamon twig?
Sure. So cinnamon twig is great. It warms the interior in order to help the body release the exterior. So that's the first thing it does. And there are very specific dosages for Guizhi. So in that instance, you use 10 grams, no problem. Secondly, it descends the upsurging of qi, as you were talking about. And that's the Guizhi Jiao Gui. And in that case, you have to increase the dosage to 15 grams at least. But you can increase it to 15 or 18 or 20 or 24. Normally, I don't go up above 24. This one that I just quoted was a very exceptional one. So that's for upsurging qi. The third thing that it does is it stops pain. And it stops pain, which is pain from an exterior syndrome. And then most pain actually has an exterior component at least. And Guizhi is absolutely amazing, sometimes in combination with some other herbs, of course. So those are three main things. And the fourth thing is that it can actually help skin disease if the skin disease is from an exterior syndrome. And that's another interesting one because it's hot, but it can actually help skin disease, which is manifesting as hot on the skin. And I think the reason for that is that it's exterior heat. So the key things about a Tai-Yang syndrome is that the heat is on the exterior, if there is heat, which normally manifests as fever, but could manifest as heat in the skin. Those are some of the ways that you can use Guizhi. What you have to remember is that Guizhi does slightly promote sweating. So the contraindication comes because of that. Because if someone has a huge amount of body fluid deficiency, you don't want to promote sweating. And for that reason, you have Guizhi Qugui Jiao Baiju Fuling Tang, which I think is clause 28, something like that, which is where you have a Guizhi Tang pattern where you take out the Guizhi and instead you put Fuling and Baiju or Cangju. And what that means is that there's body fluid deficiency in a Tai-Yang exterior. So it's Tai-Yang, Tai-Yen, but there is much more body fluid deficiency. And the other clause where that happens is it's in the Jing Gui chapter 6, which is the Shulao chapter. And let me think which line. I think it's line 8, where you have Guizhi Jialongu Muli Tang. And then in that line, you also have Ar Jialongu Muli Tang. So Guizhi Jialongu Muli Tang is for a Tai-Yang Yangming syndrome. So you've got a Guizhi Tang plus Longu Muli. Ar Jialongu Muli Tang is the same plus Fuzi and Baiwei. And the Fuzi and Baiwei push that formula into the Shaoyin in the six syndrome differentiation system. And a Shaoyin is an exterior syndrome with underlying lack of body fluids. In that case, in the Jing Gui, the Guizhi is removed because it was considered to promote body fluids too much, to promote sweating too much.
To use this particular system, this particular way of working, you really have to know what levels you're looking at.
Oh, definitely.
You've got to be able to dial that piece in very, very clearly. You
have to learn the basic symptoms for each of the patterns, for each of the syndromes. And so for each of the syndromes, then you have to learn the basic symptoms for each of the formula patterns. And you have to see how they match each other. In fact, you learn them both at once, naturally. It arises naturally.
Sure. It's sort of a yin-yang process. You're looking from two different perspectives to inform how they work together.
Yeah.
So we've been talking about this particular way of working. And, Jing Fang these days, and there's a number of different streams of Jing Fang. It's not an unusual thing these days. People know about it. But most of us have walked through that gate of TCM. Much like a native tongue, I think it's harder to acquire other languages when our thought process defaults to the first thing we learned. And I think it's the same with practicing medicine as well, right? So for those of us that are looking to acquire this whole new perspective on illness and treatment, like with this current from Dr. Fang and Dr. Hu, what are some ways to approach the study of using the Jing Fang, when our first language, so to speak, is TCM? How do we learn to acquire this new language? Any thoughts on that? Any ways that people can start to work with this and have some direction that they can follow?
Okay, so at the moment, there are several possibilities around for the six syndrome differentiation system. One is that Dr. Robidoux is going around the world teaching a comprehensive course in various different countries. So that's one possibility, would be to attend one of those courses and to learn it in a kind of more structured form, or in a structured form. So just going through each of the syndromes and what the pictures are and what it means and all of that in a theoretical way. So that's one way of doing it. The second way of doing it is the way that I've decided to do it, which is to simply run a clinic and to open the clinic to people to come along and work with me. And that way is more of a kind of an organic way of learning it. The third thing is the resource materials that we have. So one of the great gifts that Suzanne has given us is the translation of Dr. Feng's webinars. Those are available on DVD. So you can buy a copy from me. I have copies here. And you can actually immerse yourself in it and listen to him talking and listen to her translating it and while away many happy hours. So that's the way of doing it. There is a lack of source text still. So we were very much hoping that Dr. Feng's yellow book will be translated into English. I don't know whether that's something that's on the cards. Maybe you'd like to do that, Michael.
Oh, boy.
You're going through it.
That would only take about 7 years of my life.
Exactly. So what we do at the moment, we use the Wiseman translation, more or less, of the texts in my apprenticeship. But we don't use the commentary because it's not always the same.
Well, in fact, the commentary can be very, very different. And I've seen this in Dr. Feng's book, and I've seen this in Doctor Who's book. They will take a line from the Shang Han Lun and give you, a rough explanation of the line from the Shang Han Lun, which you can get from Wiseman. You can get it. I mean, there's lots of places.
Yeah.
But then they go and put their own spin on it, which kind of gets into some of the stuff that we're talking about. They've got their own. It's like, here's what it says. Here's sort of the standard way of reading it. And here's how we think about it. And then they go into, like the stuff that we've been talking about. And it can be very, very different.
It is. And we, as a group, we're working on our interpretation, our commentaries of this, of the Shang Han Lun and the Jing Gui, which maybe at some point will be published, who knows? But it's such an enormous job that to do something like that is, we'll see. But that's what we use day to day. We use our own commentary, and our own commentary has been taken from Dr. Feng, really, mainly from the work that I've done with him. Yeah, and I could grow a group out in 2016 as well. So there are quite a number of us who went and observed in his clinics and discussed things with him.
Well, a book of commentary would be very useful because when you look at any of the classical literature, there's always tons of commentary. I mean, doctors in Chinese medicine talk to each other through the centuries through commentary.
Exactly. So I'm thinking that we will just produce our own commentary on the Shang Han Lun, which will be informed partly by Dr. Feng, partly by the translations of Suzanne Robidoux, partly by our own clinical experience. And I think that, that is the only thing that anyone can ever do, really, is to present their experience and to acknowledge their teachers. Do you see what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And to take the experience that we get from our teachers in clinic, meaning our patients.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. That's absolutely vital. I mean, I will just say that sometimes Jing Fang really works in clinic exactly how it's supposed to. So that, for example, I had a patient who came 6 weeks post-viral, and she was absolutely exhausted with body pains all over, and she still had periodic heat sensations that could have been mistaken for hot flushes, but I didn't think they were, and foggy head and dizziness. And I have to say that 5 packs of Xiao Chai Hu Tang plus Lingui Zhugan Tang and 3 packs of follow-up of the same formula, but with the Chai Hu at a normal dosage instead of a raised dosage, absolutely stopped it. It stopped it dead, and she's now completely fine. And that is somebody who could have just gone on and on and on and gone into chronic fatigue.
Well, chronic fatigue, or ended up with going to a conventional doctor and being prescribed some medicine for the rest of their life that would lock them into the situation and perhaps make it worse. Absolutely,
because it was just absolutely clear that there was still some kind of an infection going on that was subclinical in Western terms. I really think that we shouldn't underestimate this medicine.
Well, there's a couple of times in this conversation we've talked about when the formula is right, it just clicks like a key in a lock.
Mm.
And I know I've had this experience. I hear from the tone in your voice, you do too. There's a part of us that goes, holy smokes, it worked that well and it worked that quickly.
Yes.
But it really, really can.
It can. And that's what's got to go into a book. That kind of case where it does exactly what it's supposed to. And on the other hand, what should go in is the person with MS, where it works very, very well, but within a context that's really, really difficult. So both sides, I think, should go in because it's very easy just to put the easy, quick cases in something like that.
Yeah, it's good to put in the tough ones. So when will you be publishing this?
Oh, who knows? We'll see. We'll see.
Great. Well, Frances, I really enjoy the time that we've spent here together. Any closing remarks? Anything else that you'd like to share with the listeners here before we say goodbye for today?
Just that if anyone is wanting to study Chinese herbal medicine, this is a really good way to start because it's absolutely possible and learnable. And TCM is such a vast ocean. It's huge. And I'm not saying that TCM doesn't work because it obviously does. But, to find a teacher who will teach you which formulas to use and which formulas not to use is almost impossible. There are just too many formulas and too many herbs. So it gives you a really good grounding in Chinese herbal medicine. And then after that, you can go off any way you like. You can study any other doctor you like, but you'll absolutely know your basic herbs. And the number of herbs that you need is, less than 100. If they're acupuncturists and they want to study herbs, it's a really good way to start.
So this is sort of the lazy person's way to study herbs. You don't need to have as many and you don't need to think as broadly.
Well, you could say that, but on the other hand, what you find is that the rigors of the diagnosis are anything but lazy, as we've been talking about with the learning the clauses and learning the syndromes and the patterns. And you really do need to learn them. So I think that my students would take exception with lazy students.
I was sort of teasing. And you mentioned this before. We were talking briefly about Li Dongyuan. And you were saying, yeah, a lot of his stuff came from the Shang Han Lun. So if you know your Shang Han Lun, in many ways it will help you to understand some of the other vast amount of formulas that are inside of TCM.
I think that's completely right. And of course, many of the TCM formulas are Shang Han Lun formulas.
Yes. It's
a beautiful system and it works very well. And I would not have been able to sit here and say that to you when I was doing TCM. I wouldn't have had the right. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. There's a real elegance to this work.
There really is.
Frances, again, thanks for making the time today.
Well, thank you very much, Michael. It's been a pleasure.
Well, here we are at the end of this episode. If you've listened up to this point, you're either a rabid fan of Qiological or the forward button on your podcast player stopped working. If you are indeed a fan of the podcast, you can help us to bring new episodes to our community of practitioners by supporting us with a membership or a one-time contribution. Details, of course, are on the website. That's it for today, friends. Join us again next Tuesday for another thoughtful episode of Qiological.